Alright, so today I'm starting a new series on the channel where you guys submit questions and I'll answer them mostly off the fly if I can, because right now, especially in the John Mayer gear space, there's no tour going on right now. We know there's an album that hopefully will release at some point this year, but other than that, there's not a lot really going on besides me obviously making content going back different tours and eras and things like that. So I thought, why not maybe every 2 weeks answer some questions from you guys. For this first video, I took some questions in 2 separate rounds on my Instagram story, and I just handpicked a few of them. If your question didn't get answered this first time around, I have some that I'll probably save for the second episode. But what I would love to see happen, just to make things easy for me, is if you submit your questions into the comments of this episode, and then I'll use them for the next one, so on and so forth. If I need more, I'll probably post to my Instagram story as well. So make sure you're following me on Instagram if you haven't done that already as well. But I just thought this would be some great extra content for you guys to give my insights, some advice, or just my general thoughts on different topics. So let's get right on into the very first kind of Q&A episode for the channel. All right, so the first question comes from Alex Horpinich, and I apologize if I pronounce any of your guys' names wrong. I'm doing my best. He says, what is your personal favorite JM guitar in terms of aesthetics? There are 2 answers to this probably for me. I really like the 64 Strat because it doesn't have as much wear as the black one has, and I love it's like the perfect sunburst, I guess, finish, like in terms of the coloring and the blocking of it, where some sunbursts don't quite look as nice in my opinion as the way the 64 looks. And like I said, just the right amount of wear on it I think is very tasteful. Where the black one might be a little controversial, but for me it's almost too beat up looking for what I personally like. But I'd probably have to say John Cruz Masterbuilt Sonic Blue Stratocaster that he used during the trio era, as well as just for that one show at the end of the Born and Raised kind of tour in 2013. That guitar is probably aesthetically my favorite of his. Blue is my favorite color, and Sonic Blue has always been kind of the guitar that I envisioned that I would have if I ever got my own kind of, I call it like my own Strat. Like I had a Mayer signature Strat before, but I wanted a custom shop version of a guitar that could kind of just feel like mine and not have a ton of attachment to John Mayer or really any other guitar. So Sonic Blue was what I searched out when I found my own custom shop. This is a 64 custom shop Strat. So just naturally, whenever I see, footage of John with his own Sonic Blue Strat, I just really like it because I've always loved the color. And yeah, this is kind of, the one that I wanted to make mine. Still need to change out the pickguard. Still need to swap out the pickups. Maybe this year I'll get around to it. Bobby Dwyer 1989 says Keeley Comp TS9 BD2 Katana CB Aquapus 3 my attempt at JM board. Thoughts? I think that that's a really great board in terms of covering a lot of the fundamentals. One thing I would say though, just if you're wanting to be as true to John's signal chain as possible, would be to go Keeley compressor, then the Katana, then the BD2, then the TS9, and then the Aquapus. Last, that would be the most traditional Mayer sound. But with that said, there's no real right or wrong. Like if you think it sounds great and you're happy with the tones you're getting, then hey, keep it the way it is. There's no need to change it. Experiment in the more traditional Mayer way if you want. That's kind of the way John would personally have his setup. I think that's a great pedal board. Really, the only thing I think you could add is just a longer delay to kind of cover some of those sounds, but overall, really great board. Legosure asks, what is your favorite TS10/TS808 clone? For me, it's going to be the vintage green Rhino from Way Huge, the GR2. I used to own one and I sold it kind of at the start of my massive downsizing of all the pedals I'd kind of acquired over the years, and I really miss it. It's a great pedal. It's more of a vintage 808 clone is kind of what George Trips was going for with that green Rhino, and it sounds fantastic. The headroom and all of those vintage Way Huge pedals honestly is insane. They're fantastic. I really miss that one and I want to get another one eventually. I haven't played any of the modern reissues, but I definitely think that if they have any of the same kind of mojo that the vintage one had, they'd be really great kind of tube screamer sounding pedals. My buddy Vince DiGiola asks, what is your favorite piece of gear right now? That's actually kind of a hard question to answer because last year I only bought one piece of gear, like literally only one piece of gear. I sold a few things last year again, kind of like in the trend of downsizing, which I'm hoping to kind of reverse this year a little bit, funny enough. But the only thing I bought last year is the Thorpe FX Chris Buck signature Electric Lightning. I absolutely love this pedal. It sounds fantastic. Thorpe just makes really incredible stuff, and of course I'm a massive Chris Buck fan. I'm wearing my Cardinal Black t-shirt even. I really love their sound and everything and the things Chris is doing, so definitely wanted to support them and Thorpe and grab an Electric Lightning. So probably this is my favorite piece of gear right now because it's just the latest thing I've bought and still kind of the newest to me. Jab231 asks, did John Mayer ever play any of his limited run signatures with the racing stripes? So there are two versions of the John Mayer signature Stratocaster that had those racing stripes and were limited edition, Shoreline Gold and Charcoal Frost Metallic. Now, Shoreline Gold I'll talk about first. John, I don't think ever actually played a production version of that guitar, and I say that because if you go back into 2003, and you can see this guitar even during the music video of Bigger Than My Body, John was playing a guitar that upon kind of a quick glance is a Shoreline Gold Mayer signature. However, there are a few key differences with that guitar, and which is why I'm calling it definitely a prototype version of a Mayer signature. The one that's the most noticeable and really the most kind of impactful in terms of the specifications is the fact that the guitar is a hardtail. You can clearly see in the Bigger Than My Body music video and in some live footage I'll throw up on the screen for you guys as well. It's a hardtail, which is kind of cool. John's really never used hardtail Stratocasters. There's the Olympic white one, which is the 61 off the top of my head, I believe, and then the 66 hardtail, kind of more sunburst one as well. Those are really the two Strats in general that John's ever used that are a hardtail. So to see a prototype version of the Mayer signature that was a hardtail is pretty interesting. The other two kind of odd things about that specific guitar is that the knobs for the guitar are the more amp style ones, which you'd see on the Cypress Mika limited version of the Mayer signature. So that was different on John's specific Shoreline Gold guitar. And then the racing stripes as well. It's a different kind of pattern. They're thicker, and you can tell aesthetically wise, it was kind of like a pre-production version of what those racing stripes would end up looking like. So in terms of Shoreline Gold, yes and no. There was just that prototype he used in 2003, and for that Bigger Than My Body music video. Then the Charcoal Frost one, John did have a few different Masterbuilt versions of that guitar that he used, specifically kind of in the early days of the Continuum era in 2006, like for the Webster Hall Continuum release show, for example. You see John using one of those Masterbuilt Charcoal Frost metallic Strats. And then going into the Continuum era as well, it was used for Gravity a little bit, but then it kind of transitioned into being the Bigger Than My Body guitar. So yes, John did use both, but not a ton. Mr. Jeff Brand asks, would you say the T-Rex replica is the best JM delay? No, I wouldn't. It's really great. It's, I think, personally underrated in the Mayer community because for the prices that they are going for, you can really kind of nail more of those really nice Pete Cornish TES, even Providence Delay 80s sounds with that pedal, but I definitely wouldn't say it's the best. I think you just can't argue anything other than the Pete Cornish TES. That one is just full stop, the most incredible delay John's ever used, in my opinion. That's just, I think, kind of a fact. Now, this next one I actually had asked a few different times, kind of in different ways, but they're all about the same topic. So I'll bring up just two separate ones here to talk about, but I did get multiple questions actually in asking basically the exact same thing. So Blair Garvin Miller asks, good alternative to the TES, one that's actually attainable, so not the DLY 83, the Providence Delay 80s, which is very expensive and hard to find. I think there was 400 total of the 80s. Yeah, there's 400 total of the 80s, 80, and 82 that were made. Kind of the 80 and 82 were the two kind of pre-production run custom shop versions that were mainly Japan only, and then the purple Providence Delay 80s was a production run, but in total they only ever made 400 of them. So it's a very limited pedal that is definitely hard to find, and I would not consider that obtainable, really. And then as well, Danielle Barrero 1 asks best alternatives to the Providence DLY4, so the chrono delay. When it comes to the delay 80s, it's kind of funny just talking about is the T-Rex replica the best John Mayer delay. I think that is a very strong candidate for being a really solid alternative to doing the TS thing as well as the Providence Delay 80s thing. I don't own a replica anymore. I had one, and like I've mentioned already, part of my mass kind of downsizing of a lot of gear, I sold that one off, but I did do a full-on shootout just for my own educational purposes, and I was pleasantly surprised with how great the T-Rex replica sounded next to my Providence Delay 80s. Now, I've never played a Pete Cornish TES, so I would definitely say if you can shell out and find a Delay 80s or a Delay 82 even, those would probably be the best TES alternatives. Even like the Strymon El Capistan, I've seen there's the kind of a famous shootout that was done on YouTube, and that sounds really great as well. Next to it, I've never played one, so I can't give my own personal experience, but you can go check out that video as well. It's on YouTube. But for me, I kind of, right now, I'm recommending the replica as being one that John did use. It sounds great. You know, there's a David Gilmour connection as well, which, you know, it's David Gilmour, obviously. You know, if he's used one, you know it's a really great sounding pedal, and I just really liked how it sounded next to my Delay 80s. So that's kind of one I'd recommend. As far as chrono delay alternatives, it's kind of hard to say because the chrono is pretty accessible. It felt like they were discontinuing it, but then I've seen they're still producing it, it looks like. So I just kind of say it's a delay that if you buy once, you kind of cry once sort of deal, where I feel like it's worth purchasing because it's got a really great screen. It's got a very accurate tap tempo on it. You can also do 2 separate presets with it. The feature set is fantastic as well, and it's just built very, very well. So I almost kind of say, if you're looking for a delay like that, try and find just one that's a little used for a bit cheaper instead of just trying to find an alternative. I just highly recommend the chrono delay to do those kind of more digital delays, longer delay sounds for John's kind of thing. I just would recommend trying to stick with it if possible. GR7_MX asks, will you do another budget board build for vintage Frusciante? I think it could be a fun topic. I've had a few people even in the comments of some of the videos that I've done in that kind of challenge series I did just for fun, honestly, ask about if I do another one for Frusciante. It's just difficult because what alternatives are there really for the Moogs? You know, there's the Line 6 FM4, but even then, that's not necessarily that easily obtainable. They're a little hard to find, and when you find one, they're generally fairly expensive. I could try and do one. I just would have to probably try and plan my strategy in doing it. So no promises. I think it would be fun, but just realistically, how good of like a Stadium Arcadian pedal board I could build with the budget of $1,000 and make it that true and accurate to John's sound, I don't know. I'll try and come up with something, but no promises. Jetstream Jeff asks, how is John splitting his guitar signal to his multiple amps? Basically, John uses a Radial JD7 amp splitter. It's either in a rack unit or sometimes you'll see it just sitting on top of John's amps as well. Goes into there, splits everything off. He doesn't do like the stereo sort of like splitting thing. So really, if you have any sort of device that's meant for splitting an amp signal and can do like the phase flipping and everything like that, you'll be fine. I just had to double check exactly what I use, but I use a Radial Big Shot ABY to split the signal between my Vibroverb and my 2-Rock. That works fantastic for me. So John just uses a very fancy kind of version of that to basically kind of handle the splitting needs for his amp signals. Chappie Bermejo asks, is the modern TS-808 good enough for the trio sound? For sure. Tube Screamers at the end of the day are Tube Screamers. They all relatively sound the same. A modern TS-808 is definitely going to get you in the ballpark. It just depends on, I guess, how accurate and how deep into that tonal rabbit hole you want to go. And obviously on my channel, that's something I very deeply have gone into. That's one rabbit hole I've spent a lot of time in. The only piece of advice I can say is that, like, whenever I see someone ask me, or even in like the John Mayer Gear Lounge on Facebook, for example, if they talk about what's the best, most accurate, like TS-10 clone or vintage TS-808 clone and things like that, I always kind of try and give the advice, or I always would take the stance of, when you have like a guitar that's got the right pickups and everything like that, and you have the amplifiers that really can also allow for those differences and nuances in different pedals that are clones of the same thing to really shine, then I think you should more kind of concern yourself maybe with that if you want to. But if your rig is kind of, you know, more either entry level or a little bit more bare bones, for example, I wouldn't stress too hard about the minute nuances between different tube screamer clones and things like that. If you guys get what I'm saying, like when you have an amplifier that can more actually like let those differences shine and let you hear them, then for sure, yeah, I personally think it's fun. Just even, you know, like I said, the differences are very small, they're minute, but it's fun just to experiment and see what you kind of think different ones sound like and that kind of whole sort of thing. But if you know you're kind of just starting out, kind of making a John Mayer inspired rig, for example, and you have like a Blues Junior or something like that, and you can have a kind of a more basic kind of, you know, fundamental pedal board and stuff like that, like I just personally wouldn't worry too much about the differences between the clones. A modern 808 is certainly going to get you some great tones in general, so don't stress too much about it, if you guys get the advice I'm trying to give. Jay Plays the Strings asks, was chorus always on during the 2019 tour? Sounds like it, along with 3 drives for the lead. Now, this is a topic that I've seen get discussed a little bit online recently in terms of John during the PRS 40th anniversary show was using the CE2 on all the time, and a little bit for like some like trio stuff. It kind of sounds like there is almost like a vibe or like a chorus that was being used the entire time. I think maybe we're starting to get a little too far with that topic or that kind of idea that John had. Chorus definitely was not on, always on for the 2019 World Tour. It's never been an always on effect. Sure, John's used it for like 2 one-off shows, basically, always on, but that I definitely would not indicate as anything he's going to do going forward. And I think it's just a fun thing, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like, it doesn't sound like John, in my opinion. It's kind of like, okay, it's a little bit weird. Like I went back and listened to the 40th anniversary of PRS tones, and I was like, okay, that's what I'm hearing. At first I was kind of like, is there like some like phase thing going on with the audio or something? But definitely is some chorus on John's tone for that thing the whole time, and definitely wasn't my favorite tone of John's ever. It's probably near the bottom of my favorite tone of John's ever. You know, and I know that video I made was even a bit of a hot topic on just, you know, John's playing and stuff like that. A lot of people were unhappy with just, you know, all of that, which I just laughed at, honestly. But, yeah, I just don't want people to start going a little too overboard and like, oh, like this is John Mayer's new like trick and stuff like that. Like it's not. He's used it for 2 one-off shows. Don't stress about chorus. If you like it, then sure, leave it on all the time. But definitely it's, you know, I wouldn't count on it being something John really does much in the future. In terms of 2018 World Tour, just to give you guys some context, I guess, to start off the board during the first leg, the Asia-Oceania kind of part of the tour, John had the Boss CE2 on his pedal board, but that was in a specific loop with the Blackstone Appliances MOSFET overdrive for the course drive loop, which was intended to kind of give him the lead solo tone for Helpless. I think there's one example I've found where he's actually used it live besides the rehearsal shows. That's a video I plan on actually making. It's a cool sound, but the fact that it was used, I think, once kind of leads to why, when it comes to the North American leg, it was just completely taken off. And then as well, the Chase Bliss Warped Vinyl Hi-Fi was on his pedal board also, but it didn't get used all the time either. Fast forward to the North American leg, we'd see the Free the Tone Try Avatar chorus get added on there to provide some different things. And then John did have Leslie as well that he would use, the Leslie Nielsen kind of switcher. We heavily theorized, like it's the only thing that really makes sense is a just activator for a Leslie that was placed off stage. You'd see John using that for solos as well, quite frequently, but not a guarantee. It wasn't a complete consistent thing, but it was something he did use. So yeah, not something that's used all the time, and that's just why I wanted to touch on this one as well. I just don't want this to be a thing that people start going back on and thinking John was doing either all the time, or I think it's going to be something he's doing in the future. If you like the sounds when you're kind of playing along and stuff like that with it on all the time, then that's great, but definitely not kind of, you know, a thing we should concern ourselves too much with in terms of John's tone. Macklemark asks, do we know much about what JM uses the night sky for? Seems like an odd choice to me. I totally agree. On my bingo card of pedals I thought John would ever use, the night sky definitely wasn't on there. From my understanding, it's definitely marketed as more of a crazier ambient reverb that just has a lot of tonal possibilities and can really do some great sounds, but just you wouldn't think John would use. But I think, John definitely is a Strymon fan. He's used a lot of different Strymon pedals in the past, and they're obviously built very well and just really fantastic in general. So I feel like what John kind of did is he got one in just because he's probably someone who buys one of everything at least, and just was like, yeah, I'll give it a shot, and was able to dial in just some pretty like standard, almost reverb sounds, but that he really liked the way it sounded on an acoustic guitar. And then that's why I wound it up on his pedal board for the solo tour, and then even for the Fire 8 show as well. It was present on the little board he had also, and I think you could basically tell that one of the LEDs was on for one of the presets, so I kind of just think he dialed in like maybe one or two little presets for the acoustic guitar that weren't, super ambient-y or anything like that that it's kind of marketed for, but he just found some nice kind of, more low-key reverb sounds, and that's what he's using it for. That's kind of the most I can theorize as of right now. This one's from Miles Messina 22. What's your thoughts on the Dumbleloid B? I really want one, really badly. Pretty much all of my favorite 2019 World Tour tones are from the European leg, and John was using the Dumbleloid B for those outro solos, or even like the first solo of Solo Dancing in the Burning Room, which I've covered on the channel as well. He's done before with the Dumbleloid B. I think those sounds are fantastic with both, like the 64 Strat and the Silver Sky. So it's a pedal that I just really want to get at some point, but the Shins Music kind of annoys me because I feel like it's very hard to actually find a dealer for their pedals in North America. Like, Dumbleloid B is really hard to actually find, and there are like the odd one floating around on Reverb that are brand new or whatever here and there, but it's either like very expensive or they don't ship to Canada, for example, for me. So it's one I want to get eventually, but I actually am kind of just annoyed that it's really hard to buy their stuff. They're like lots of small boutique manufacturers. I feel like you can have an easier time buying their things or getting them, whereas Shins, you just can't really. So it's one I want to get eventually, but I've also heard from a friend that I really trust. He got one, and he actually wasn't that big of a fan of it in the context of his rig, and he is, very close to a one-to-one of John's rig as well. So it's one of those things I just need to get and experience for myself to give a full-on opinion on. I think I'm going to absolutely love it, but something that I haven't bought just because it's been kind of a pain to track one down, especially like the specs, like the finish I want. Some of those are like, kind of more beat up or more flashy, and I just want kind of a more basic looking one. So yeah, just a little bit annoyed at how difficult it's been to track one down. So Shins Music, if you're listening, maybe try and find a way to make it easier to buy your pedals in North America, because I'd love to do one and have a dealer that I can really go to a bit easier for, but I'm struggling to actually source one in the finish I want. This one's from Taylor Palin. Would you consider adding more Chris Buck info? Might be good filler. I'd watch. If there's stuff with Chris's, rig or tone that I think is interesting, I will probably make a video on it, just because I know the video's not going to do well. I know it's going to be like a 10 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10 when I see the results in the YouTube studio, but it's more just what I like to talk about. Like the few videos I've made on Chris's stuff, I just made because I genuinely enjoy the music that Cardinal Black makes. I think, Tom's got an incredible voice, and the band in general sounds fantastic. And it's just someone else that's, honestly, Chris Buck is the one player who inspires me the most right now out of anyone, hands down. It's Chris and what he's doing with Cardinal Black. So, yeah, I probably will if anything cool comes out, especially because now they just announced like a North American tour, which I am definitely, even though they're not coming anywhere near me in Canada, I'm definitely going to make the trek to go and see either in the States or elsewhere. So strong possibility, even though, like I said, I know most of you guys are just here for the John Mayer stuff, which I understand. Okay, these next two are from Gabriel Maniero, just asking some stuff about the MXR Duke of Tone, because the King of Tone, obviously, very unobtainium. My name's been up on the list for over a year. That's how just disinterested in buying gear I've been for the past while, is that I've had the ability to buy King of Tone since November of 2023. I've been able to buy one, and I just haven't ordered it yet. I really got to get off my butt and do that before, you can't anymore, if anything like that were to ever happen. But obviously, it's a very unobtainium pedal, very expensive on the resale market, the collector's market. So the MXR Duke of Tone, definitely the one that's very accessible and stuff like that. He just asks, what do you think about the MXR Duke of Tone? Any regards on JM tones, and have I ever tried it? Would I put it before or after a tube screamer? So I think that probably just kind of slightly answers if I've ever tried one. No, I have not. I used to own a Prince of Tone like years ago, but I got rid of it. I thought it was a great sounding pedal. I'm sure the Duke of Tone is the same, you know, kind of one side of the King of Tone. It's a blues breaker, but a little bit of its own thing as well. I think either way, it would sound absolutely fantastic. Even if you got two of them to kind of do like a King of Tone dual stacking thing. Chris Buck, like we were just talking about, uses the King of Tone for a lot of his sounds. Sounds brilliant. John has used King of Tone a little bit, not a lot, which I think is kind of surprising. I think he would sound great with one too. So yeah, I think it's fantastic. Definitely a really cool buy if you want. Would I put it before or after the Tube Screamer? Honestly, like I really like the sound of the King of Tone stacked, or like a blues breaker stacked as well, like pedals going into it. So you could do it either or. The traditional John Mayer way would be to put it before the Tube Screamer, but I think you get some pretty cool and awesome sounds with it placed after too. Just, you know, experiment with what you like, but traditional John Mayer way would be before. This one is from Andrew D. Smiley. He asks, when you're trying to get John Mayer's Where the Light is Belief Tone, what pedals would you use? So for that, I would use a Katana or Clean Boost into a Blues Breaker style pedal into a TS10. Those three together should get you within the ballpark of the actual kind of gain and overdrive sounds. Then I would use an Aquapus to give me just a little bit of slapback, or something to give you just a touch of slapback, also just kind of a feel thing. And then something that would give you that longer delay. For me, that'd be a Providence Delay 80s. If you do all of that, you will be really within the ballpark of the tones for that. That's just the kind of straightforward combination that I'd use to go for that kind of sound. All right, now the last one I'm going to answer here is from Ryan.Grossman. He asks, I've seen John have boards with two TS10s. Is there a specific song where he would use both? This is kind of going to be the interesting thing going forward for the next big tour under John's, you know, in the promotion of his next album. For some kind of bigger lead solos, we've seen John gain stacking the two TS10s together. Think of like the John Mayer Trio performances that he's used them for in 2023. For like the outro solo of Wait Till Tomorrow, for example, it was TS10 into Clone Centaur into TS10. I think the solo for Who Did You Think I Was as well was double stacking TS10s. I'm gonna have to go back and verify that for you guys. So I'll insert that in here in just a moment into the video, but it's kind of just a gain stacking thing, and I'm sure even for the solo tour, for like the Changing solo, for example, it was probably all three stacked together. So nothing specific yet that we can say for certain that he would use it for, but it could very well be a new kind of gain stacking combination that John uses in the future. The next tour will really indicate whether or not that's something that, you know, John is really experimenting with and enjoying. And that is going to conclude the very first Q&A episode on the channel. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope some of the questions I chose to answer were kind of fun or gave you guys some insight, just something entertaining, and to kind of, you know, keep some content coming out for you guys. Well, like I said, it's a little bit slower right now. So like I said, if you did enjoy this video and do want me to continue this series, number one, leave a like on the video. That'll just let me know you guys are enjoying it. And leave questions in the comments down below. That'll just make my life easier in being able to just scroll the comments of each previous video in the series to get the ones for the next episode. And please leave them in the form of a question. I got a lot of just more comments or statements in my Instagram story questions that I posted for this episode, and it kind of just made it hard for me to answer it, especially on the fly like this. So please phrase it in a question that can kind of be answered in this sort of style. Like I said, if it requires a little bit more detail, I can go back and do some research or, provide some further context, depending on if I choose it, but that just would help me out. Hope you guys enjoyed either way, and if I didn't answer your question, resubmit it from the first one, maybe then I'll answer it. And like I said, there's some other ones from the first one that I might use for the second episode too. But yeah, if you enjoyed it, leave a question in the comments down below. And yeah, hopefully you guys did like this video. Take care, everyone. I'll see you on the next one.
Anyway, go ahead and click the subscribe button if you like what you see.